We learned this week that pro golf will be the first major sport to return to the scene. The PGA is going forward with its Charles Schwab Challenge in early June, but without spectators. This will certainly be a big test case. Are we all going to turn into golf fans this weekend, or at least in anticipation of that?
Well, I think we're all looking for something to follow and watch, and of course, sports is terrific reality TV. So I think it's great for fans. It's great for the PGA Tour. It's probably very safe. You know, you're playing outside. You have players that naturally socially distance anyway in the game. So I think it's a good first step for sports. Other sports like tennis and auto racing probably are in the same place. And then I think it'll be followed by baseball, hockey, basketball, and soccer, later on in the summer.
So what do you think about that, George, with regards to some of those sports where you do have a large congregation of fans like football, college football, baseball? Do you think it's possible that those leagues can play either without fans or with some sort of reduced attendance and still draw the viewership on television in order to make it profitable?
I think so. I mean, sports make up 90 of the top 100 programs on television. So I think there'll be a real pent-up demand to watch sports. Will it be the same without fans versus with fans? No, it won't be the same. But I think there is pent-up demand, and I think that, you'll need innovation in terms of viewing. But I think a fair number of people will tune in to watch their favorite teams and players play.
Okay, pent-up demand, I understand, but the economics will certainly change, especially on the ground, because a lot of these places, a lot of these college towns rely on attendance to drive their local economy. Businesses are dependent upon it. What does this mean for the schools, for the cities that they're in terms of the changes that we'll possibly make to college football and how it gets broadcast?
Well, listen, we're hopeful that college football plays, and of course they're looking at a number of contingency plans, either playing on time, delaying, or in the spring. And college football really is the number 2 sport in America, so it's important socially and economically. But as you point out, Scarlet, economically, college football is very important to America, starting with the schools, because football underwrites 70 to 80% of the revenue in the athletic department. So all the other sports outside of basketball, for the most part, are underwritten by football. And without that revenue at the schools, that'll put enormous pressure on those institutions at a time when they're going to feel pressure from state funding and also tuition pressure. On top of that, take about a regular game in Alabama, $20 million of economic impact per weekend. So in small towns in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, and Ohio, and Wisconsin, these games provide enormous economic impact to the local community. A New Year's Day game is $93 million per game of economic impact. The national championship game was $150 million to $200 million. So the economic impact at the local level in the schools of college football specifically is significant, not to mention all of the service industries and jobs that are in and around the game that people take for granted, concessions, consumer products, other elements. College football is very impactful.
Yeah, well said, George. I am curious with regards to the broadcasting side of this. We've seen over on ESPN over the last few weeks, they've actually been broadcasting things like esports and other types of sports that probably typically wouldn't make it into primetime television. Is it possible that we could see some of those sports maybe get into the zeitgeist in a way that they might not have done had we not been in this health crisis?
Romaine, you're exactly right. One of the things, esports in particular, as an example, NASCAR has an iRacing game that's drawing 900,000 to 1 million people per viewing. So absolutely, this opportunity will provide new opportunities for other sports. And also, I think it's going to provide innovation. Every business has challenges in this world today, and everybody's got to pivot and innovate. And so I think you're going to see a lot of innovation that probably will sustain itself past the virus.
All right, we talked about college football, we talked about broadcasting, so that brings us up to the big game, which is football, pro football. It doesn't begin until the fall, so they have some time here. But how do you see this shaking out? Because my understanding is if the pro football players don't play, they don't get paid. So right now, their interests are aligned with the owners. Both parties, both sides want to get going and want to get their season going so they can get paid and things can return to normal. Talk about the economics at play there.
Well, that's right. I mean, well, first of all, nobody's going to do anything that's not in everybody's best health interest, players or fans. But assuming that's adequately addressed, playing games without fans, at least provides television revenue. And different sports have different levels. The NFL has the most significant level of television revenue, and pretty robust. So that'll be a viable business for them. But there's no way to understate the economic impact of the not having the live gate at these games. Tickets, concessions, consumer products, suites, local businesses, and the service industry around the live events. That's a big industry, and that's going to be dislocated. Right now, severely, it doesn't exist. And when the games come back on television, you're still not going to have that industry. And that's going to be a big issue. Not just in the short term. I think this is a 12 to 36-month situation where live events, the live event industry, is going to be impacted. Now, the only question is going to be is how severe is that impact, and that's something that should not be taken lightly, particularly around the Barclays Center. There's a whole industry that lives off of events at the Barclays Center, and so that's going to be impacted, and it's a big impact.
So, George, I'm curious, with regards to some of the contracts, the player contracts, obviously you have the NFL draft coming up, but you have a lot of players who are either in free agency or outside of their contracts. Do you think that will be affected in terms of what they're able to negotiate because of the slowdown that we have now in either games not being played or delayed?
I don't think for the NFL for this year, because it's formulaic and it's based on last year's revenue, that it will have an impact for this year. I do think, you saw today Major League Soccer is renegotiating their deal with their players who are going to have to take a significant cut in order to play the games because they're not going to have the live gate revenue. Same thing with baseball, where not having that live gate revenue, it's not financially viable to play the games without a reduction from the players. So I think every sport is different. I think in the case of football, it's less affected versus some of the other sports.
George, final question to you. You mentioned that you see basketball and hockey coming back. It should be playoff season right now. What will the playoffs look like? Will they just head straight into the playoffs and it'll be a truncated version of what we normally see?
I think that's to be determined. I'm pretty confident that both the NHL and the NBA are looking at ways to innovate. And again, some of these innovations may sustain this summer. But I think you're going to see innovation and pivoting to try to put together a compelling product and a credible product, but a timely product. And trying to check all those boxes will be difficult. But again, it provides an opportunity for people to experiment on things that they otherwise never would have been able to. And there may be some good ideas that come out of this that last for a long time.